I was under delusion. Well, looking back now, if you ask me, I was following Lucifer. I didn't realize it. I thought I was following God, but I wasn't. I hope that people watching this will use their discernment. We're reaching some very dangerous times in the world where a lot of people are lacking discernment. And I see a lot online of personal interpretations, people glorifying miracles, seeking out miracles and supernatural experiences. And I'm here to say that all that's demonic. We don't seek out miracles. We know God makes miracles, but we don't seek out these supernatural mystical experiences because that's what the demons want us to do.
Revelation 12:11. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they loved not their lives, even unto death.
The things that have been inflicted onto me, the things that I've inflicted onto myself, the Lord healed me completely.
All things, all beings submit to him. I could speak the name of Jesus and that evil would leave.
All I could feel was a peace and him say, "Not yet, daughter."
I called his name, and within a second, my breathing was restored and I could breathe normally again. I could not believe it.
And I saw Jesus interceding for me. And he said to me, "I've been protecting you from things you never even knew about."
Martyria. Episode 33. Jackson's Martyria. In Sickness and Defining Christ.
I grew up in a household that was very secular, which my household, my family was broken from the start. As far as I can remember back, with the exception of maybe one or two minor memories, my parents have been separated. And both sides very secular. Only
Gotcha.
mention of God when when asked or confronted about it, So it was one of those things. Like, unfortunately, a lot of people I feel like are kind of experienced, like they don't really know of God, but they're also ashamed to admit that they don't know of God. So it's, oh yeah, I believe in God, but that it doesn't go anything beyond that. Very secular, never any religion, other than some really, really menial statements about beliefs.
Gotcha. Now, as you were growing up, you mentioned kind of some dark things had happened or had
Yes, sir.
Been involved in your life. Can you talk about what some of those things are?
Absolutely. So I grew up and my parents were divorced. Most of my life up until 5th grade, I lived with my father. Unfortunately, God bless his soul, because he recently passed. I have experienced throughout my life a phenomenon called Munchausen by proxy. I was diagnosed at age 3 with a condition called muscular dystrophy. The long form of the condition I was diagnosed with is called congenital fiber type disproportion myopathy. The definition of Munchausen by proxy is when you either facilitate or make a illness worse on somebody that you're caring for in the pursuit of money, pity, glorification for yourself. And unfortunately, sometimes parents or whoever may be doing that will push the envelope as much as they can, for whatever benefit. So I do have a illness that it's in my body. It's a muscular illness. I've struggled with that my whole life. So when I speak about Munchausen by proxy, it's not me saying that I don't have this, but I'll be outlining how a illness in a child, parents could use that in a very nefarious way. And honestly, it makes it harder to detect. And a lot of people like me don't get taken seriously because of that when they speak about their experiences. I lived with my father up until 5th grade. Most of my earliest memories were pretty much good memories, staying with him at my grandma's house. Nothing too crazy. Up until I guess I reached around the age of, like, I would say maybe 8 to 10. That's when, had some more self-awareness come into play and started picking up on some things. It just didn't feel right. Some of the instances that has happened, I've had my clothes ripped off of me out of anger. I've had food thrown at me from not eating what was made. That's a common symptom of people with my illness, because I had a feeding tube put in my stomach. when you have a feeding tube put in your stomach, it causes you to be a picky eater growing up. So that was one of the situations. Other things is a lot of emotional and verbal abuse throughout my whole life, up until 5th grade. Um, so definitely a lot of bits of rage that came out of nowhere.
Hmm.
Definitely feels like there's some demonic undertones to that. I was probably
Wow.
9, 10 years old.
Hmm.
Um, short. In that time frame, due to his drug addiction, he ended up neglecting me. Unfortunately, with my feeding tube in my stomach, it had developed what's called a granular tissue. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to try to define it. But essentially speaking, I had tissue that fused my tube to my body, kind
Hmm.
of on the verge of necrosis. That's a good way to think about it, dying tissue. Because
Yeah.
once that happens, the tissue underneath doesn't get any oxygen. So therefore, my mom had came to the school. I was staying with him in the country, going to a school, elementary school. I was in 5th grade, and my dad was taking care of me up until that point most of my life. And other than that, I don't have really many memories of my mom up until 5th grade, unfortunately. So she ended up kidnapping me from my school, with falsified court documents that
Oh,
the school didn't verify.
really?
Just he swept in, took me off. He came, I wasn't there. Her goal was to bring me to the county that she resided in so she could start a court case against him about neglecting me.
So you didn't
So
have many memories of your mom growing up until about 4th, 5th grade, but
the only memories I really have is I would probably stay with her for like a weekend, like once in a blue moon.
okay.
Other than that, the only memories I have is when her and my dad were together, like
Okay.
off and on, very briefly, um, throughout different periods of my childhood.
So she was aware of the neglect that was happening and just kind of waiting for her time to sweep you away from that then.
That's what I thought.
Sure. Yeah.
Unfortunately, revelations came to mind that so when I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, she was the one taking care of me. So she was aware
Okay.
of my condition. My parents were together when I was diagnosed at 3 years old.
Hmm.
I had a muscle biopsy done. They did the testing. I thought my mom was going to be my savior. I thought my mom was going to bring me away from this dark household to something with love, comfort, and peace.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it was quite the opposite because my mom is the main person who perpetrated the Munchausens by proxy.
Hmm.
My mom only picked me up because she was the one receiving my disability money while my dad had me. It came up in
Interesting.
conversation that it would be brought up to the court,
Hmm.
but as soon as that happened, she went and scooped me, and it
Hmm.
started a court case against my dad. During the time of this court case, I had to listen to her tell me about what happened in my childhood, which some of it was true, some of it was lies. That's when the I would say the programming and the brainwashing started. For me to believe that she was
Hmm.
my savior, it was always put in my head that I was deathly ill, that I would be in a wheelchair, I would always need her by my side to take care of me, which is honestly like, and from my personal understanding, is kind of a dark outlook to put on somebody who isn't at that stage of their illness yet. 5th grade, I was a normal kid. I'm a smaller kid. My body is limited due to my disability, but there's nothing that I can't do that other people can when it comes to normal daily life. I
Mm-hmm.
just may be a little more limited in that regard. I went to school where my mom was living at, and I graduated 5th grade. And I didn't realize this at the time because you get older and you start learning about different societies of people and different
Yeah.
occult groups or whatever it may be. But looking back now, This was kind of what started my research into Freemasonry. In 5th grade, I was given the only award in the whole school by the Freemasons. It was some type of just recognition award. Honestly, could be nothing. I will give that. It could be nothing. But coming to find out, there's Freemasons and Shriners all throughout my family. I believe I got that due to my family's connection to these groups.
Yeah.
So then I started researching Freemasonry because I was a real big computer nerd growing up because I was always isolated by myself, so therefore I was a savvy on the computer. Anyways, moving on from that part, I would say exactly 5 months after that, I was playing basketball. I was a happy kid. Things seemed okay. Things seemed pretty normal. Then one weekend, my mom and stepfather left the house for like an outing. They were doing a outing for themselves, and my older brother was watching me, and I ended up catching the flu, which for people like me, it affects me a little worse than other people. Sometimes it doesn't. So, but when my mom comes back, it spiraled to levels that it should have never spiraled to. Me having the flu was turned into my son is dying because of this illness.
Hmm.
So when they came back, I was immediately rushed to the hospital. And the only thing that happened, well, I remember on the car ride there, my mom was looking me in my eyes when I was in the back seat of the car, telling me that I was going to pass out when I felt normal.
Hmm.
I was sick, but I didn't feel like I was going to pass out. She was telling me over and over, you're going to pass out, but it's going to be okay, this, that, and the third. I never passed out. I was then brought to the hospital. She put me, I was put in a hospital bed. I was put in a room. I was there for a couple of days because this happened right after the weekend. The only thing that came up of the hospital thing was her documenting that my illness was essentially killing me. And she told me what to tell the doctors about my pain so we'd get prescribed pain meds. I was prescribed bottles about this big. I'll arguably say about the size of this bottle, but they're square bottles, rounded on the edges. I was prescribed bottles like that of liquid hydromorphone. Therefore, I was brought back to the house and proceeded for the next 5 to 6 months. She was pumping this liquid hydromorphone into my stomach to keep me sedated and feeling ill. One of the things I will say that kind of I feel like caused me to turn away from any type of thought of God or Jesus was the fact that she gave me a Bible and told me to put my faith in God, knowing that she's the one who had control over that situation. So
Hmm.
if you ask me, it's very demonic, to say the least. Some demonic undertones behind that. So looking back now, like I ended up in the future turning to other belief systems and religions, and that's where I kind of attribute that. I was told to put my faith in God, and I didn't get any better.
Mm-hmm. So did your mom ever exhibit anything like, I mean, because I'm familiar on a surface level with the idea of like Munchausen's by proxy, but did she ever exhibit any sort of like attempt to control? Like I said, I know you mentioned you had a stepfather as well. Like, where was he at with all this? Was he kind of doing the same, like, oh yeah, you're never going to get better? Or did he just kind of like,
No, no.
that's your mom's doing that, I'm not going to be part of it? Or what did that look like?
Honestly, my stepfather, he was brought into a very unfortunate situation. It was the woman he loved and married. Obviously,
Yeah.
everything from her is the truth. While my mom was telling me these things, my stepfather would tell me, like, he was motivating me to get up and do things like this, that, and the third. Like, you could
Mm-hmm.
tell he was pushing me to be better. So, in my humble opinion, I feel like he genuinely believed her. I feel like as time went on, maybe a little bit of naiveness, but given the situations throughout my life and my siblings' life, I'm one out of 6 siblings. I'm a middle child.
Mm-hmm.
Different dads, all same mom, all different dads for the most part. About after the time frame in the bed, and one of the first supernatural experiences that I had was laying in this bed at night. I remember very vividly, I would be in the bed, this hospital bed, and it was in the center of the house. So as soon as you walked in the house, I was in the hospital bed, basically like a trophy, I would say.
Hmm.
I had a bedroom, but I wasn't put back in my bedroom. I was in the center of the house. Almost like, like this is the trophy, you know? My grandparents
Yeah.
came and saw me one time out of that whole stretch just to take pictures with me.
Hmm.
Just to take pictures with me showing, "Oh, we're with our sick grandson." The
Interesting.
the the man that my grandma was married to at the time is a Shriner, which one thing I will say is if you go on the Shriners Children's Hospital website, one of the things they specialize in is muscular dystrophy.
Hmm.
I've never been to that hospital one day in my life. I have some questions about that. If my illness was real to the level that they presented it, you would think I would be brought to the hospitals. That's where
Hmm.
I'll leave that at. What ended me being able to get out of that hospital bed and be back to my normal self was my mom going to rehab. She ended up going to rehab, and a nurse came to the home and checked me out, and magically I got better.
Interesting.
While she was in rehab, I was told that the reason she went was my fault because I was lying about my illness and how I was feeling, and it stressed her out, so she turned to drugs, and that's why she had to go to rehab.
Hmm.
That's what I was told. So that that one thing programmed my mind to think that I was the liar. I was doing something wrong. I was lazy. That's what I believed up until I was almost 18, 19 years old. That if I talk about this, it's just going to show that I'm a liar and how lazy I am.
Hmm.
So it's kind of more just one of those things I pushed to the back of my brain, just completely dissociated from that situation. I skipped over the supernatural thing I was going to explain. One of the nights that I was in this hospital bed, there was a TV put in front of me. A
Mm-hmm.
TV, I had a hospital bed, I had the pump beside me, hooked up to my stomach, also hooked up to a heart monitor, whole nine. Glorified guinea pig, to say the least. But one of the nights, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and nothing but TV static filled the room. And I would have these experiences where I would see these figures in the house, kind of outside, sometimes like outside the window. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would have just have these weird experiences, were they delusions? Were they real? I would never know. In my opinion, I think whether something's a delusion or a supernatural reality, if it has the same outcome, it's just as dangerous, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um,
The figures that you saw, what did they look like?
more or less like silhouettes.
Okay.
One thing I'll add is as all this was going on, the award I got from the Freemasons was hanging above my head.
Hmm.
I'm not going to say anything to that itself, but interesting, interesting,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I wanted to say is I have 3 children, and it's interesting to me how many people I've talked to that have had some pretty awful things happen to them during their childhood, and obviously you're no exception to that. You've been treated very unfairly, even though you do have a diagnosed disease that you're born with. Nothing you could do about that. But to try to exacerbate it and lie on it and somehow benefit and profit off of it is really, it's really challenging to listen to those types of things because as a parent, I want to see the best from my children. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them happy. I want to see them healthy. I want to see all these things. And unfortunately, I know you'd kind of alluded to kind of some of the demonic nature of the way that you were raised, and even in this idea of like giving you a Bible while at the same time kicking you while you're down effectively. You even felt like that in a way was like a demonic gesture, and I think the most disheartening thing over all of this is we see that the affliction that our parents are undergoing spills over onto us whether they want it to or not. I mean, there may
Absolutely.
be a world in which your mom thought she was doing all the right things, You know what I mean? And I'm
It's
not trying to
possible.
speak for your story, but
It's
it,
it's possible.
it's one of those things where you can be so out of touch because of what your own struggles, and
Absolutely. The demons
that
that
it
you
just,
allow
yeah. and
is
and and the one thing that I the one thing I think that's really really challenging for me is to recognize that demons don't care how old you are. They don't really care how old you are. They're willing to afflict you. They're willing to, because they're betting for the long game. If you have those struggles while you're young, then they hope you carry those struggles with you till you're much older and you can make some really bad decisions or become a parent yourself and make the same decisions your parent did,
and
because that keeps everybody in that same cycle, you know?
perpetrating that cycle.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I ended up getting better, going back to school. Then things kind of seemed to be kind of normalized out a little bit for just a brief period of time. Then we ended up moving to another house. And then this was the period of years where a lot of wild stuff happened and arguably is burned in my brain worse than that previous situation. Throughout the period of this living there, I experienced a lot of still physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, a lot of unfortunate, very unfortunate things. But the medical abuse kind of seemed to, like, I would say, kind of just stop at that period of time.
Hmm.
It was like I was a normal kid, just like nothing, like whatever happened in that time frame beforehand, when I was in the hospital bed, never happened. So that just completely, like, it was just something I pushed to the back of my mind, didn't think about it, didn't worry about it.
Hmm.
But at this new house, my mom started really going off the rails and spiraling, and she would have nights where she would be up all night but be a different person. She'd be like under, like, I would almost say like a dream like sleep state, and she'd be
Hmm.
doing things all over the house, and she'd wake up the next day and never remember anything. Even while she was in this blacked out state, she would she would attack me and my little siblings, verbally, um, emotionally, sometimes physically. Um, it was just one of those really hard things to have to go through and not understand why. And I start realizing that all the medical care that I was receiving previously was just stopped, just halted. It was like I was a normal kid. And she ended up taking the tube out of my stomach, and I haven't had one put back in since then. I've been completely fine.
Hmm.
We end up moving again, and then I stayed at that house up until I left for good on the first time. At that house, I had my life threatened by her. I ticked her off one time, and I was told that she would leave me outside the house naked and crying if I ticked her off or whatever was going on in that situation. What really caused us to push to move to the house was when I had my first girlfriend. I was in high school around all the time this time frame. I was freshman in 10th grade in this rough time frame. I got with a girl, and my mom ended up getting very jealous. We ended up breaking up after my mom found out we had came together and had intercourse. Me and this girl.
Hmm.
You know, when you're growing up in a household like that, you tend to find your out validation in those things instead of, parental guidance or parental love. She forced me to explain to her all the details of what happened between me and that girl.
Hmm.
Very sexually charged questions that a mother should not be asking her son about situations like that. And then she had pulled me out of school. She was taking my phone and sometimes from her phone and saying bad things to this girl after me and her broke up.
Hmm.
That caused that female to unfortunately retaliate against me at school. So she pulled me out of school.
Hmm.
Finding out way later after talking to that female that it was something kind of coerced and pushed by my mom. So then it turned into, well, we're going to call the news because the school ain't doing nothing about this situation, and just trying to put me on a pedestal again. Like, this is my sixth son. He's like, whatever. And I didn't want any part of it. And that's when I started getting ideas that my mom was possessed
Hmm.
by something very evil. Um, if not possessed, influenced, guided in some way, you know. Um, because the changing of the personalities, the mood swings, the abuse was rampant in that time frame. I believe it was 10th grade going to 11th grade, or at the start of 11th grade. After I had to break up with that girl and that situation carried out, I continued to do my school in online class. So for the next 4 to 6 months, I basically spent the whole time locked in my bedroom.
Hmm.
And this was all based on her feeling betrayed because I had that activity with that female.
Right.
Um,
During this time, is your father involved at all? Are you seeing him at all? Is there any contact at all?
no, sir. After the court case went through, after she first got me, I didn't hear
Hmm.
anything from my father. You
And
know,
then, and then I know I'd asked earlier as well, but was your stepfather still around at this time? Was he aware of
yeah,
anything that was going on?
that's where it gets tricky for me
Hmm.
because I feel like it was one of those things like maybe some naiveness, maybe he didn't want to believe it, but I could tell looking out through my whole life. You could tell just by looking at him, he was trying to claw his way out, but for some reason he couldn't. Based on my interactions with her and what she would tell me, what would happen if she wasn't pleased or whatever, I imagine the same things would apply to him as well. So therefore, that 5 6 month time frame, I would be in my bedroom doing my schoolwork or just playing video games, something of that nature. If it wasn't that, it was my mom yelling and screaming at me, trying to get me to lie and fake this court case so we can get this girl in trouble.
Hmm.
Trying to get me to make up details, this, that, and the third. We end up never going to court. She ends up not taking me, and things get dropped. Thank the Lord for that girl, you know, because if she would have came out negative in that, like being affected, that'd be heartbreaking. At the end of that time frame, we had to move to him to another house, and it was roughly, I'd say, an hour away. She was, come to find out, moving in the future and talking to some of my other siblings, because at that house we moved from at this time, my some of my older siblings would stay at the house. So
Hmm.
they would have insight on things, but as soon as they tried to step in or talk about things, they would be ostracized. This was
Hmm.
a common element in our family. They would, it would be a routine of them coming around and trying to do the best they could to be a part of the family. A hard conversation comes up, then it's, oh, he's lying, oh, she's lying, always problems. Then us as little siblings, or me and my younger siblings, we were taught to demonize our siblings if they didn't please my mom.
Hmm.
Any type of argument, me and my two little siblings would have to be involved in taking up for my mom. If we weren't, we were yelled and screamed at, and we
Hmm.
were punished. So we ended up moving.
I was just going to say one thing I didn't ask about earlier, and I mean, I know we've been talking about your mom a lot, but you said you were one of six, right?
Yes, sir.
Were all of the children, I mean, I know you kind of alluded to, you know, that your younger siblings were also kind of, if you guys weren't on your mom's side, then you weren't on anybody's side, and she really laid into you for that. But the abuse that you had mentioned, I mean, are you aware of the type of abuse that your siblings had experienced? Like, was it all the same as what you had experienced effectively, or do you think you were singled out for some reason or in some way?
So the older siblings, from what I've spoken with them about, to my knowledge, there wasn't any medical issues going on up there. Definitely other forms of abuse. So my younger siblings, there was some elements where that was a common theme, but not
Hmm.
to the, I would say not to the fullness of what I went through. So
Yeah.
it
So
did seem like there was some singling out, but definitely all my siblings have experienced some type of brokenness from our family situation.
yeah, well,
Unfortunately,
brokenness seems to not be able to make anything but brokenness, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So moving forward back now to, the next house we moved to,
Hmm.
there was some quarrels between her and her mom about the house and whose name it was in, a whole bunch of drama and nonsense. Well, I mean, realistically, I'm glad I went through all this situation. We're taught about the cross we need to carry, and sometimes some people need training to carry that cross. And I just realized now that my whole life has been my training. So
Hmm.
I would go through it 100 times over for the strength that I have today to conquer it.
Yeah.
I'd say that. Um, I'm graduating high school. That's when, and at that house, I started picking up tattooing. Started tattooing myself in my bedroom, and it just kind of went up from there. And that was the biggest, that was the one of the biggest things in my life at that time that I held on to, because it was giving me an out. It was giving me a way to get away from there. When I started tattooing, I started making a little bit of money here and there. And even after I was 18, this happened about 18. I would say I started tattooing around 15, started messing around with it. Really
Hmm.
started taking off around 17, 18. By the time I was 18, 19, I had started working at shops, all
Hmm.
self taught. So that was my out to take care of myself because to this day, I've yet to receive a dime of any disability money ever in my life.
Hmm.
When I started making some money to take care of myself because I was put in a camper outside the house, that was my living situation. That was a way for her to keep me as close by as possible.
Hmm.
So I had to make money so I could take care of myself for the things that the camper needed or whatever. So I started working at a shop, and then I started making a little bit of money, and she would ask me how much money I would make, and then proceed to want to use that for her own spending, even get after even getting my disability money. So that threw up red flags to me, and
Hmm.
that's when I started waking up to there's something very wrong here. And then I had met another girl, which was a relationship she butted her head in and kind of tried to break apart the best she could. And that was the biggest blessing in my life, that female, because she was the one to really open my eyes. I was still believing all the lies I was being told.
Hmm.
So it was a very big blessing.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because you use the term red flag now, and I'm sure people who are listening are like, "This is the first red flag." I mean, like almost from the first minute, like red flag after red flag after red flag after red flag. But I think the one thing that kind of reins it in for me is when you're a child, you really want to believe your parents. You really
Yep.
do. You want to trust them. You want to put every bit of confidence you can in them, and the reason I ask you questions about your parents and siblings is not to question your story, but is to just really shed light on how easy it is for somebody to get brought into this sort of situation. We don't know anything about our neighbors sometimes. We don't know anything about our friends sometimes. We don't know anything about those who go to church with us sometimes. And there can be so many things happening. I mean, it reminds me almost of like the stereotype of the mom that's like yelling at the kids, but then the phone rings and she answers it and she's like the happiest person, the nicest person you've ever heard in your life. I mean, I think one of the reasons why it's so important that we share our testimonies is to frankly say that you are not the only person who's had the experiences that you've had in this way. Maybe there are some unique situations to you, but man, like child abuse, which is certainly what we're talking about. I mean, I don't think that's any secret at this point to say that child abuse, neglect, all these things really play a strong role. I mean, even the sexual abuse that you're talking about, physical abuse, mental abuse, all of those things. And I know you've mentioned the word demonic as well. All of those things set to only serve one thing: brokenness, that continued brokenness, so that cycle comes where whatever girl you end up finding yourself with and she gets pregnant, and then that cycle like it's all a setup. And yeah, unfortunately it's almost kind of like you grow up, you get old enough to have kids, you have kids. I break them the same way because you're broken. They grow up, they get old enough to have kids, they have kids, they get broken, and we just keep them in this cycle, kind of like keeping everybody in the darkness. And just keep everybody in the darkness. Don't show them anything in any sort of light. And I think the real trick to yours, it sticks out to me, and I appreciate the way that you worded it. But like, your mom even gave you a Bible, and even that became darkness to you. You know, it's so malicious the way that the enemy works against us, and so intentional the way that that he tries to draw us away from Christ, from really his calling on our lives, from who we're made to be. And I think the interesting thing is, you know, you say, and I know we're still just kind of scratching the surface on your testimony, but you know, you're like, I would do this 100 times again. I would definitely do this. If this makes me who I am today, then I'm willing to do this. I do wonder if you would still be the person you are today, but through a whole different form of upbringing where Christ is like, well, this is what I had for you. This is what I wanted for you. And this is what was, in a sense, this is what was taken from you. Not to say that he can't restore those things, right?
Absolutely.
But like, I mean, it's one thing to say I've learned to be resilient because I've gotten the crap kicked out of me my whole life. I mean, that's one thing, right? But also, it's another thing to say I've learned resilience because my parents encouraged me to persevere. Christ has encouraged me to stand firm. Like, and both of those things can be true. It teaches you resilience, but the path to get there, to that place of resilience, is so different. You know, I mean, I guess the reason I am trying to make like a distinction is to say the way that you were raised, I can't imagine you believe this is how God intended for you to be raised necessarily. Like this was his plan from the beginning, but despite the fact that you were raised the way that you were, God still can redeem that in you, within you. You know,
Oh,
I think,
absolutely.
that that's the thing that really, that really challenges, like that's what like hits in my mind right now, is it's like, yes, all these things happened, and I, uh, my upbringing, by my parents, there are a lot of striking similarities to what you're talking about, and some individuals in my life as well. And this is not my testimony, this is yours, but again, it's just this redeeming nature of we can see your upbringing for what it was, but now you can see it for what it is, or what it's becoming, you know.
Absolutely.
And I think that
Absolutely.
that's really the blessing of being able to share a testimony like this, to share your upbringing this way.
One thing I will say is talking about some of the things that I talk about and some of the things I bring awareness to, sometimes that's met with harassment, death threats
Yeah.
from different people, whether
Hmm.
it be groups, whether it be societies, whether it be family, whatever it may be. And if I didn't go through all these things, I would be worried about something happening to me from speaking the truth. But that's not what we're called to. We're not called to have fear, you know?
Yeah.
And for big things to happen, for big change to happen, somebody has to put themselves in an uncomfortable position, maybe even relatively unsafe position to spread
Mm,
awareness.
mm,
And if I didn't go through things I went through, I would be terrified, especially like I was last year, because I was still terrified of all this, even trying to find Christ. I was
yeah.
terrified. So I didn't find his fullness, but now I'm not terrified.
Mm,
You know, as Christians, we're taught to be martyrs if that time comes.
mm,
And if that time came for me, my whole life would play back through my head and I would understand that I've been getting persecuted my whole life. So what
yeah.
would be new? It's nothing but an armor now. I guess
Mm,
that's the best way I could put that.
mm,
But we can move forward now to when I was leaving my mom's house
yeah.
for the first time. So she was trying to get me to pay her money, um, even though she was receiving all the funds for my disability. Every time I asked her about me receiving my money for my disability, even after I was 18, she would have to sit me down and have this long example on why I couldn't get it, basically just confusing me to try to make me not push that. So this girl ends up helping me out. Like I said, she was my girlfriend at the time, and she really like put her neck out on the line to help me. She came and got me in the middle of the night. I left, and that was that. And I had to text my mom how I felt. I had and just block her. A couple days after that, I unblocked her, and she ended up calling me. It was either her calling me or my stepfather calling me. Either way, we ended up on the phone. I was in the car with my girlfriend. And at this time, I will say I started smoking weed, 18 on,
Mm-hmm.
addicted to weed. My belief system, well, I was into everything dark and satanic at this point.
Hmm.
Tattooing, it is an alternative subculture. Sometimes leans more heavily on the darker imagery and stuff. And that was kind of one of those things that meshed together for me, So, but
Yeah.
I didn't believe in anything other than it's just cool looking. The idea of God at this point was completely non-existent. I
Hmm.
I had every criticism that you hear atheists or people who aren't Christians have about Christianity. I had all those criticism at that time. But this female, she was a Christian, or she probably still is a Christian. I'm not saying she converted, but
Sure,
she's a
sure.
Christian. And some of my comments with her, you know, she was telling me like, she was planting that seed, trying to get me to. He's like, like, you shouldn't be talking like that. And she was honest with me. She was like, I don't want to be with somebody who's talking like that. But
Hmm.
she saw that I was in need of serious help.
Yeah.
So, but when I ended up on the phone with my mom, sitting beside her in the car, it was a voice that was not human. It was a voice that was not human.
Your mom's voice? Hmm.
It was everything demonic.
Hmm.
It was like she had a voice changer, but I know she didn't do that. So I just had to just leave it. She then tried to hunt me down and find out where I was. She tried reaching out to somebody she knew who could have had access to search up where I was living at with my girlfriend at the time to find me. But thank God that person didn't help her. So, but I'm working then, and then me and this girl, we end up, because I wasn't a good person. I really wasn't. I had corrupt ways myself. You know, I was narcissistic. I had really big ego, especially being a tattoo artist. It's like one of those rock star careers, quote unquote. So like my ego was overinflated, and and we ended up butting heads over all these things, and we had disagreements and whatever it may be, and there was a little bit of just some arguments and disagreements, and we ended up splitting apart because I didn't have no compromise with her when I should have. So that situation made me run back to my mom,
Hmm.
you know, because it was my mom saying all these things about her previous. So in my mind, like, oh, we broke up. She was this way or that way to me. My mom's right. I should have listened to my mom. I wouldn't be in this situation right now.
Huh.
So but everything that it was talked about is, you know, any type of arguments or quarrel I had with my mom, I just pushed it to the back of my mind. It's like it never happened, especially on her side too. So then I started to kind of get back in cahoots with her. I ended up moving back in with her at some point, and then I started working at a different place, a different shop, and I used that time to save my money up and really get out of there for good. I still had a relationship with my mom and stepfather, and it was for my little siblings and mainly my little siblings and my stepfather. Because I knew if I if I continued to try to talk about things that happened to me in the past, it wouldn't be recognized, and I would just be like my older siblings and be ostracized and exiled. So I came back around so I could have something to do with my little siblings and him because sometimes that you just gotta do what it takes, I guess, to try to be there for people.
Yeah.
And also like I even like forgave her and kind of just pushed it off to the side. And then so at this point I have a vehicle, I have a place to stay, have a decent gig. But my ego kept flaring up, you know, continued to get more narcissistic and hateful towards the world and I'm better than everybody else. Look at
Hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
I was real flashy. the material world took over my life. You know, um, it was straight up narcissism. There's no other way to define it. And I remember that all changed. I didn't become a better person when this all changed, but I was comfortable with my situation. I was getting along, didn't have any worries in the world. Everything that happened in my past, I just blanked out, put it in a box, and locked it away. One day, my mother showed up to the place that I worked at without telling me. I didn't
Hmm.
know she was coming. And it's like a light switch flipped for me. And I've had crippling anxiety ever since then.
Hmm.
Very crippling anxiety, especially at my place of work because,
Yeah.
that's where it happened at. So ever since then, that started affecting my work. It started affecting my work. It started affecting my attitude at work. It started affecting me coming to work on time.
Yeah.
It was affecting all these different things. And I was also, at this point, I was still smoking a lot of weed. So ever since then, like, it's like this light switch of anxiety flipped on for me. And it's been crippling ever since, up until, when I came to Christ, that he's given me copious amounts of healing. But at this time frame,
Hmm.
it was affecting me really badly. I had everything I thought I wanted, but it was all the materials, lust. I was hooking up with different people. It was like I had everything I wanted as far as the material world went. Um, but something was off in my life, and I would spend every night crying myself to sleep and not understanding why, like, these things are happening.
Hmm.
And that went on for a very, very long time. I ended up leaving that shop because me and the owner got into it. It was something very silly, but it was blown out of proportion. I don't really want to speak on him. God bless him, but on my end, like, I was a butthead about it. You know, More
Yeah.
so like just based on the things that were going on in my life. So it was,
Sure.
because at this point, the only thing I knew is if people treat you wrong, it's death to them. Get out of my life. You're the
Yeah.
worst person ever. And so I ended up leaving us, and then I start my own shop. Things are going good. I end up upgrading from there to an even bigger space for myself. And at this point, I'm tattooing for about 10 years or about 9 years, 8, 9 years. Things going good. I got a name for myself. Things are just going great for me.
Hmm.
But something was still off. Still crying myself to sleep every single night, having all these worries and anxiety just over nothing, absolutely nothing. And I was like, what in the world was going on? So, and there was some times in then where I started partaking in psychedelics,
Hmm.
which I ingested mushrooms a couple of times, and I had some experiences. The first time I did it, it was your, I guess you would call your average trip. I'd say it was like my brain was, I had a psychedelic trip, but it wasn't. Even though I recognize now it was spiritual, like, I didn't have any spiritual aspects that came from it. It was just, oh, I'm just having a good time. There was another time that I ingested mushrooms in the place I was staying at, and I had all these faces like spinning, looking at me, which
Yeah.
I believe is probably an entity of some sort, whatever it may be. So that I will say that I was experiencing like some type of supernatural with that. So I thought I was finding my answers with that. But I still didn't believe in God. Like, God was a joke to me.
Hmm.
I was the tattoo artist who wanted to do everything satanic and blasphemous. It didn't matter what it was. Like,
Hmm.
it got a shock out of people. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do. I wanted to
Mm.
I wanted to aggravate people who believed in it because they had a piece I never had.
Hmm.
Looking back, that's what I realized. I'm just working, smoking weed every day, couple psychedelics here and there, hooking up with all these women. But things are pretty much, to me at that time, normal, I guess. So fast forward to 2025, February 1st, 2025, my stepfather committed suicide.
Hmm.
He used a 45 in the shed out in the yard.
Hmm.
I saw him that day, that morning. I had ordered some supplies to their house and I went to pick them up. At this point, the only person I really talked to was my stepdad. I'd call that man every day after I got out of work. We'd talk as long as I wanted to talk,
Hmm.
you know, and I love that man to death. I mean, I love all my family to death, even the people who've done some wrong things to me.
Yeah.
God bless them. But the thing about my stepfather is he wasn't a man to sit down or lay down at all. If there was something to be done, he was going to do it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my stepfather did everything he could to take care of things in the house and the animals, but he received no help. And my stepfather was 6'2", 275 pounds of muscle. Just to explain, his stature. The day that my stepfather committed suicide, I was there that morning, and it was weird because I ordered supplies, so I was just going to run and get the supplies and go to work or
Yeah.
whatever. But my stepfather was in bed, which wasn't normal. That's why I mentioned that. And she dragged me to the bedroom to go see him.
Hmm.
And the thing is if he was in bed, we knew he was feeling bad, so he was sleeping and we didn't bother him. He was wide awake with the 1,000-yard stare. He comes out his bedroom because I'm there, comes to see me, but he just the blankest stare I've ever seen.
Hmm.
Then I leave. I take a picture going out the driveway because I was posting stuff online, like stories or Snapchat, whatever it would have been. I
Yeah.
just have to take a picture, and it's wild because I was thinking like it's such a pretty day.
Hmm.
So I go to work, and sorry,
It's all right.
I go to work. I do the work I had to do that day, and I get a call. I don't answer it because usually I was working. I had
Hmm.
gloves on, so I just disregarded the phone.
Right.
And I get another call. I'm like, obviously she needs someone, but let me finish up with this person, and I'll call him back. I got my customers out the door. I get another call. I answer it, and it's the sheriff telling me my stepfather passed away. That's always said, passed
Hmm.
away. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, he's been sick recently. I hope that it destroyed me. But I was like, he's been sick. He was
Hmm.
older, so I was like, maybe that's what it was. So I hit the highway, speeding the whole way there. I was about an hour away, and my little brother calls me on the way there, wigging out, wigging out,
Hmm.
because he's the one who found me. So I make it there. There's cops on the driveway, and I go inside the house. My first thing is like, I'm like, when my brother told me that on the phone, brother told me what you walked in and saw. So my little brother, I told him, you know, stay strong, be there for mom. I'll be there as soon as possible. I pull up, the cops all, I run out. First thing I do is run to mom inside the house, make sure she's okay. My little brother's around. And I see there's a suicide note on the bed. The
Hmm.
officer told me I would be able to read it. I come outside, and then I asked officers, I'm like, I don't know why I did this, but I asked the officers who were outside, I was like, can I see them? Can I see him? I want to see him.
Hmm.
And they told me no. And then they took the note and put it in evidence and walked off with it. And I was like, I was told I was getting to read it. And since I was aggravated about that, one of the officers put a flashlight in my face and asked me what the F my problem was. And I better calm down.
Hmm.
So, it was a situation. And so they ended up taking them off. And my mom's telling the officers about hi my stepfather's alcohol addiction and this, that, and the third, and how she thought he was cheating on her, and all these things were untrue.
Hmm.
And I but, in my mind, I was like, I was just I didn't know what to think. So, they took him off, and my mother and my little brother, they went and got a room, a hotel room, and that's where they went for the night.
Yeah.
And I'm heading out, and I turn off the light to the house, like, walking out the door, and then I got this feeling that there was all these people in the house just staring at me. It was the emptiest feeling. Like, it was just really eerie. Like, I felt people watching me as soon as those lights went out inside the house, whatever it
Hmm.
was.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving, going to my place and, you know, going to sleep. And now we have this, now for the next few days, it's funeral arrangements, preparing all that. My mom, everybody supported her at first and did their best and that was one thing that I thought was going to be positive in that moment was everybody came together to be there for my mom.
Yeah.
Even my siblings who had nothing to do for a long time. Everybody put their own pride aside and came together. And so we end up having the funeral. Me and a family friend packed up the house and brought it up there. Me and my older brother, we brought the RV that they had to the grandma's house because my mother couldn't drive it. So that's what we did. If I'm not mistaken, it was either a day before the funeral or a day after the funeral. There was still remains of my stepfather in the shed.
Wow.
Yeah, the funeral was about 4 or 5 days after the fact, and me and my brother, um, essentially had to clean up the remains that was left in the shed.
Hmm.
So we did, and we did it to honor him. We vacuumed up what was left and taped out a square where the blood stained the plywood and just painted it black.
Hmm.
Did the best we could just to respect him. And I remember my mom coming into the shed after we did it and just walking over that square like it never happened,
Yeah.
stepping all over it. This was like, this was after it was dry and stuff. And it was like she could just go in there and it was like nothing was different.
Hmm.
And and at this point, I still ain't got to read the suicide note. The only thing I know of why he did what he did came from my mother and
Hmm.
the little bit from my little brother, what he was telling me. The funeral wraps up. Everybody ends up going off back to their homes. Some of the family lives out of state, stuff like that. Fast forward mm, throughout that month, my birthday was coming up shortly after. I ended up spending my birthday alone. And this was the point where I remember the first seed was planted for me. And I had some friends that I talked to right after my stepfather's passing who kind of was like, have you thought about God? But I still kind of push it off. There was a blood moon. I don't know if that means anything or has any significance. At the time, I thought I just thought that was interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but the day after, I'm so distraught and broken after that. And I called this officer that I met at the gas station nearby because I would go to that gas station all the time. And one day he just looked at me and he started asking me about what I did. And I told him about my career and tattooing and stuff, and he just told me, he's like, "I'm proud of you." Just random. So I talked to him every time I went there,
Hmm.
and he gave me his number. I never hit him up until that day because I wanted some advice on what to do.
Yeah.
And I called him, and he answers, and I'm crying, and I asked him if he needed some advice. Before I could get anything out my mouth, his tone changed, and he got really, like, I wanna say stern, but not angry, like he was mad at me. Just stern, because
Yeah.
he asked me if I believed in God. I was like, "Not really," you know? And he was like, "Well, you," and he told me, he said, "Well, you need to talk to him and get right with him."
Hmm.
And then I told him, I said, "I feel selfish for attempting to do that because it's because I needed something."
Hmm.
And but he told me, he said, "Doesn't matter." He said, "You hang up and you talk to God."
Hmm.
So I hung up on the phone, and it was the first time I ever prayed in my life in a genuine way. I asked God, and I said, "God, please show me if you're real or not, because I have a family to save." So after that, I went to a concert with my friend. Me and my friend were leaving the concert, and we're passing this guy, homeless guy, puking on the side of the street. And I tell my buddy, I'm like, "Let's go pray for him. Let's go see what's going on and talk to him and pray for that." So we go up to him, and he's talking about how he feels like people are after him. He's obviously going through some type of psychosis. He was talking about smoking marijuana, and he was puking on the side of the streets. We start praying for him. We make sure there's somebody on the way for him, and we sit with them before until somebody comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And the homeless people in that area, they take care of each other. So when a couple of the homeless guys saw that we were around him, they came up to make sure everything was okay.
Yeah.
One of the guys pulls a knife out on me.
Hmm.
It was a knife about that long. It was curved, double blade. And I'm like, "Bro, like, I'm not here to cause any harm. I'm here to make sure he's okay." And he backed off. And I just stood my ground, was stern, but I was, and he
Mm-hmm.
understood. So they then the people that came up decided they were gonna stay there if somebody came. Come to find out, the guy we were helping and those two homeless guys, their names were Timothy, Daniel, and Matthew. And it came up in conversation, and that's when something like just clicked for me. I was
Hmm.
like, "Whoa." Maybe it was divine, maybe it wasn't, but that clicked for me.
Yeah.
Ambulance comes up, and they just sit there. The ambulance just sits there. Nobody ever comes out. They sit there for like 30 minutes.
Hmm.
The lady comes out the ambulance and looks at me and says, "If he's not dying, we can't help him." Went back in the ambulance, drove off.
Really?
Yes,
Hmm.
God's honest truth. And so after they left, maybe even more irritated, so I called 911. Had a sheriff come or a police officer, whoever, and I told him what happened. So the police officer ends up coming. He ends up getting the guy, and he thanks me for doing that. And they
Yeah.
go off, and then me and my buddy, we go back to my place, and my buddy was very surprised on what I did because that was the first point that anything in me was reflected something related to God.
Yeah.
And he prayed for me and went on from there.
I think over the last stretch of what you've been talking about, the thing I think that just keeps kind of coming up in my mind is like it's all this weight. There's this inherent weight that you can try and run from for a while, but you can't
Yeah.
run from it forever. And I think
Yeah.
even now as you're sharing, sharing everything that you're sharing, and tears come up and emotions come up and things like that. I mean that, to me, to me, that shows the humanity behind all of it. And I think I guess the reason that I bring up this idea of like the weight that comes with all of it is because we live in a broken world. We have to bear weight that we shouldn't have to bear, or at least weight is put on us that we shouldn't have to bear.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think that that's really the challenge, is like you're experiencing all these things with your family, with the police, with even like with the situation with the homeless gentleman who's, you know, very ill, and, you know, all this is going on. And I think it's such I think the challenge of it is, you know, then all of a sudden kind of Jesus comes into the picture in some ways. And,
Mhm.
and I've talked to a few people too, where it's like Jesus starts to just creep in almost, you know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, the interesting thing is that, again, this weight isn't our weight. And so,
Yeah.
like, we still, instead of trying to bear it, we try to share it. And I just, listening to your testimony, listening to what you're saying, like, I'm so looking forward to, and I'm not trying to skip you ahead, but I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to, like, where does that thread of Jesus like pull you through onto this other side? And at this point, I know we're talking about last year. I mean, we're still,
Yeah.
this is very, very recent. So it's at this point, I guess ultimately what I want to say is I'm rooting for you. Like, I'm really, really
Thank
rooting
you.
for you, because there's so
I
many things
appreciate it.
that are happening, that have happened in your life. There's so many, the psychological element alone, outside of medication, outside of drug usage, outside of whatever you have added to the complexity of what's been
Yeah,
going on
right.
so far, there is so much going on. And I know Jesus is going to show up. I know he's going to show up somewhere.
He's coming.
Where, yeah,
He's
where,
coming.
so where is that? What does that look like? I know you're living with a friend.
One night, with my friend sitting beside me, I called my mother and I was so furious. And I was telling her, like, are you ready to back off now? And I said some things I shouldn't have said. I told her that she was the reason my stepfather did what he did. And that's the reality of the situation. I feel horrible that I said that, but that, that was the truth to me at the time. So then I ended up talking to my biological father because I feel like it was time. I was already prepared to forgive him for anything in the past. I wanted to see what he was up to. I just feel like it was time.
Hmm.
And talking to the phone on me, he seemed very genuine and wanted to help me out. And he told me he would help me with everything, you know. And we went off from there. I talked to him for it. And so we came to understanding that I was going to go over to his house about 2 hours away. Said he'd help me with everything. Um, so that really put some like a boost in my confidence, because I was getting validation from my father that I haven't received in many, many years. I
Hmm.
haven't heard from him. I heard from him one time, to be fair, um, on one of my birthdays, like the year prior. But he sent me a message and I disregarded it, you know. So so I just left it alone. The night after I skipped over this, the night after I was told that it was my fault of what happened on the phone,
Hmm.
I went to go to sleep that night after staying up. I went to go sleep that morning after staying up all night, so I couldn't sleep. And my friend, he he looked at me, he said, "Jackson," he said, "have you seen the Russian sleep experiment?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's what you're doing to yourself right now. Get some sleep, please." And
Yeah.
he left. And I remember as soon as he shut the door behind him, I had this face come at me.
Hmm.
The best way I can describe it, it was a white face, almost looked like your typical idea of like a female noir vampire.
Hmm.
And then it was like that, and then it went away, and I went to sleep.
Huh.
And at this point, I just didn't really think much of it. I just took it for what it was. So I ended up going to my father's house, and I realized my father is doing very well for himself, really well off,
Yeah.
really well off. So I was like, dang, like that's awesome. Like I'm happy for him. And I heard some things from his side of things that kind of made some sense to me, a little more so at that time, because like, I excused a lot of things in the past just because out of the hatred I had towards my mother. And that wasn't
Hmm.
right of me. Not that me trying to reconnect with him wasn't a good thing, but it shouldn't have been out of hatred of my mom. You know,
Sure.
we
Yeah.
shouldn't run towards things because we're running away from something.
Hmm.
Um, just like one of the fathers at one of the churches I attend told me, he said, you don't want to run towards the church, Christ, God by running away from something. You want to go to him because he's drawing you near.
Hmm.
He was explaining to me like he's like, that's how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So you understand the fullness of the faith. And that really resonated with me looking back now. Like we don't want to run away from things to want to go in directions because of his drawing us in a natural, very genuine way coming from us. My father wasn't ever really religious from my understanding, like growing up with him,
Hmm.
but kind of a little more so, I guess, like I thought he was, I would say. I don't know, it's just I didn't know where to put that with him. Like, I was still learning who he was, like after all these years, and I was hoping he changed for the better. He remarried and got a new family. He had stepchildren, the whole
Hmm.
nine.
Yeah.
So I was trying to get to know him for the better. I was happy that he had seemed to fix his life up and do good, and I was just happy. I was glad to be back around, and I was and looking back now, it felt like to me at that time that I went over there and I was invited over there so I could see what he's done for himself. And that was the real reason. First thing I was shown when I went there was bank accounts and balances.
Interesting.
So that blew my head up big time.
Hmm.
I was like, darn, that's crazy. And you're going to help me? Like, this is a dream. Like, what in the world? It's almost like everything that I should have been turning away from, as far as like being lustful or honest or some other things that like, or I'm sorry, not honest, but lying. Like, just all these things that I found myself doing up until this point that, you know, should have been the point I was going to start turning away from those things,
Hmm.
you know, making myself a better person. Um, and I'm still very like, I just know I believe in God and Jesus. That's it. That's all I know. I don't really have any. And up until this point, I've studied Gnosticism. I was into Satanism, atheistic Satanism. So I didn't
Hmm.
worship a deity or do any rituals. I was just interested in learning about it. And
Hmm.
the thing about Gnosticism is it revolves a lot around sex when you go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And then it turns into the whole Kundalini snake rising. And when you try to partake in those things and you don't reach the end point, I'm trying to explain it as decently as I can,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
obviously to people who struggle with lust and things of this nature, that's like just holding a carrot in front of you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The carrot of sin in front of you. So for me, and when you study Gnosticism, you learn that the creator of this world's evil, the demiurge. We're
Hmm.
in this simulation. So this is my personal understanding of Gnosticism at that time and how I was applying it to myself. The next best thing, because you learn you are God, it is your world. So the next best thing if like you have the Kundalini stuff, but then you also have the idea in your head that, well, we have this generative principle, which is intercourse, genitalia, and I'm God. Me having intercourse is actually a good thing because it's creation, you know? And I can't say that like I just sat there and thought that, but subconsciously, that's what my mind was validating.
Hmm.
So, and I wasn't getting any validation in my situation. So I started looking for it in females.
Yeah.
And that's when I made some really poor decisions on how I spoke with some females, how I carried myself with the cockiness and the entitlement and the narcissism. I thought I was gonna start partaking in adult films. Like just open up this whole box of mess. Like you would think like why would you like how would you think that's okay?
Yeah.
You know? And I became a disgusting person over it. Just
Hmm.
because I was just wrapped up in lust and if I was talking to a female, there was one outcome I wanted out of it. If I was talking to her in a flirtatious way at that time, I had some people I talked to that was talking to me about my situation. Um, but that was the consensus I had, especially living in this world of like the manosphere and alpha male and because up until all that it was Gnosticism, atheistic Satanism, just because I was into the imagery, and then like Stoicism
Hmm.
and like the manosphere. Like that was my identity. So like all these women giving me attention is a good thing.
Mhm.
And somehow I justified this alongside trying to find God, which I don't know how I came to that conclusion. And that speaks to some to this deception, a warning of deception when it comes to personal interpretations. Because I completely believed I was doing the right thing following God, and I was reading little bits of the Bible here and there.
Mhm.
And I was finding just the verses that would validate my feelings. And I didn't realize it, but I was looking at it from a Gnostic perspective because that's what I was studying right before all this happened.
Hmm.
Because a friend kind of told me about it, and it seemed to make a little bit more sense to me at the time than your Christianity, you know?
Yeah.
So it just made me go down a really dark path. And my dad was kind of like, it was almost like, he was reaffirming it,
Hmm.
I would say. Like it was like we went out to a restaurant and he told me to lie to the waitress about my age so she'd be attracted to me. Just things like that. Like things I was like, why would I want to do that? It's like
Hmm.
I don't that's not how I want to carry myself. But so then I feel like that almost made me feel like since he has this successful life and he's doing all these things for himself, then it must be okay for me to be like that. Look at him.
Yeah.
So I completely validated it for myself. And I treated a lot of people poorly over that. And I had to repent, and I regret that to this day. That allowed myself to drop to that realm of darkness, you know?
Hmm.
And so moving forward, one blessing about that is one of the people I talked to surrounding that, it was a conversation of lust. But based on the responses that like of how this girl was speaking to me, that's when I started realizing there was something demonic surrounding like that idea of what things I was thinking I was going to do.
Mhm.
And it made my stomach hurt for like 3 days straight. So that whole idea of all that stuff, I just like the idea I was going to be like an adult film star or something, whatever. I was like, yeah, like I need to step away. Like I don't want a
Yeah.
part of that. I'm good. Yeah, because it was just very silly, especially like trying to bring awareness to like my traumatic situation. Dude, like that's very like antithetical to each other. It's
For sure.
like really making myself look bad with that. So I turned away from that, but I was still right over lust. I just turned away from the idea that I was going to be a film star. But I was still right over lust and still trying to have a outcome of lust when talking to people. So my ego blows up. I start researching way more about Freemasonry, Shriners, my family. That's when I started realizing all these connections about my family with the Freemasons and the Shriners and,
Mm-hmm.
that whole nine. And then you start getting into the conspiracy realm. And then the dangerous pipeline of that is that's why I personally, like for me, like coming to the Orthodox Church in the future, because I started inquiring with the Orthodox Church a little bit after I made it to my dad's. Because one of the things I was like, all right, so they don't allow Freemasonry. If you're a Freemason in the church, the common practice is like, now, please, like anybody listening to this, go validate this with a Orthodox parish or someone who's way more knowledgeable. But from my research on it, if you're a Freemason in the church, you get excommunicated. It's a no tolerance. Or
Hmm.
like, they'll give you the chance to turn away from it and denounce whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, that's step one, because I know this stuff they ain't got nothing good going for it. And I don't want to be in a church where I'm trying to talk about these things and I'm talking to people who are going to take that side of things. Because I've seen the other side of it. And so I started inquiring about the Orthodox Church. And I met a father at the parish near the house, and he was amazing to me. Really great guy. Welcomed me with open arms. I'm all tattooed up. Everybody in the parish was loving and kind and gentle with me.
Hmm.
I had the chance to hear my story, little parts of it. The church father was the main one I talked to in private. One night I went to the church during Vespers, and they did the catechism class after. Which I will say, like, I wasn't properly catechized at that time, but not that it was the church's fault. It was my fault because my mind wasn't on really wanting to learn. My mind was still focused on all this whole realm of my world.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't, but I was there and I was doing my best, but I was still sticking to my personal understanding. Because at first I thought, well, if people believe in God, they're good to talk about this stuff. Then I learned, all right, the new benchmark is if they believe in God and believe in Jesus, it's cool to talk about this stuff. That's good. The next benchmark that's what started me like pushing myself into learning about the church because I understood that some people will say, yes, putting your faith in Christ saves you. Like that's the point. You have to have faith in him. But I had to come to understanding that people define Christ differently.
Hmm.
So when two people say put your faith in Christ, they're probably meaning two different things.
Yeah.
And that's where I start. That's why I really started buckling down. And I was like, all right, so there's way more to this than just finding a church of people I like,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I still wasn't really, I was more focused on exposing bad things, having arguments with people. Because I wanted vengeance to take out on somebody. So I was finding people to argue with, take it out. I was arguing with all these tattoo artists as well. Telling them, like, if you want to threaten me, come see me. I was challenging people, whatever. And that's what I was more focused about than trying to find God in a genuine way.
Hmm.
And that's where I seriously messed up because I believed I couldn't be deceived at that point. Because I done figured out the whole picture of my past. So that really boosted my ego up.
Hmm.
Like, look what I've been through and look how I made it out. Like, I'm better than you. And that's what my mind, like, led me to believe, I would say. And then I really started having some really manic, psychotic delusions. And I feel like that came a little bit from talking to people who just say they believe in God or Christ, and then putting myself in echo chambers to validate whatever feelings that I wanted to have. If somebody told me something wrong, I would go talk to a Christian who agreed with me.
Hmm.
And that's very dangerous. And that's why I hope my testimony will shed some light on how dangerous that mindset is. Because I had the opportunity to fully submit to God then, and I did nothing but continue to run away from him.
Yeah.
I was like, my job now is I want to expose every bad person in the world I can, get my vengeance, whatever. And I was telling people that's what God told me to do. even though he didn't. That didn't come from God. And if I was reading my Bible and submitting to the church like I should have in the catechism class and understanding and denying myself, I would have understood that at the time. But I still didn't know what it meant to deny myself.
Yeah.
So I represented the faith very poorly to a lot of people, and I feel horrible for that. But it was nothing but a me problem. So I had this idea, and I was getting involved in all these like politics and conspiracies in the small towns that all these events were kind of evolved around. Just going down a rabbit hole that necessarily isn't a bad one, but with the mindset and the way I did it at that time, nothing good came from it. Very spiritually dangerous to go down these rabbit holes without the right proper understanding and armor of Christ, I will say.
Yeah.
But to me, it was more so, it was more than just being interested in a conspiracy. It was me figuring out what is going on with my family and why is all this happening. So I had to turn to that. So then I got this bright idea that I was going to expose all this stuff, and I got really, really manic. So I didn't go back to my dad's house because it was a whole different area. I went to a family friend's house, and I decided that I was going to take psychedelics again. So we end up going to a vape shop, and I buy a chocolate mushroom bar. I'll say right now, I fully believed it was actual mushrooms that I was ingesting. Come to find out, a little down the road, I found out it was 5-MeO DMT that I ingested. Which for the people listening, one of the most potent psychedelics, but a synthetic version of it, a lab version of it. But when you buy these chocolate bars that say mushroom blend on it, they don't tell you that on the box. You have to look up the lab reports on it that they post, and then you'll find out what's actually in it. So I would highly, with extreme warning, like stay away from anything of that nature whatsoever. As Christians, like stay away from the vape shops at all costs. Like in my opinion, it's like stay away from it.
That's probably a safe bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need to get my mind off all this stuff. So I did that. I was eating this chocolate bar, and I ate the whole thing all in one go, like 10 dips, 10 servings of it, all in one go. Because I did not want to be here, not in a suicidal way at that point, even though probably subconsciously, but I didn't want to be present in my mind.
Yeah.
After I ingested it, I started researching more stuff about Freemasonry. And this is where things changed forever for me. I thought my life was wild up until this point. It was the only beginning. I'm sitting on my family friend's couch on my laptop, looking at my computer. I pull up this video of all it was Freemasonic artwork. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to expose the truth about this. So if I watch this stuff on mushrooms, they'll tell me the truth about it. Such a wild conclusion to come to.
Yeah.
But this is where I had to understand the spiritual component of this world to the fullest. And this is why when I messaged you about my testimony, I wanted to really shed a light on personal interpretation and demonic deception when we start to try to follow Christ. So I was looking at this Freemasonic artwork on a YouTube video, and one of the pictures popped up, and there was a emblem on the picture, and it was like a very esoteric coded image. But I experienced this thing where I was pulled into that pinhole. I had these Middle Eastern deities. I'm just guessing based on the imagery that I was perceiving. I had these Middle Eastern deities almost like spinning in a circle around my head. And then this picture of these men chanting at me came up. In my mind, it was probably a mixture of my mind and looking at the computer, mixture of both in the trip. And then a eyeball came at me, and a blazing star of fire came behind it. And then I was pulled back into the room where I was in the hospital bed when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And I looked over in this room. I was brought right back to that moment. I told you about the night I woke up in the static, and I look over in this trip or whatever, however people would like to classify this experience as. I look up to my left and I see this Freemasonic picture on the wall. And then I look over to the right and I have these dark silhouettes chanting over me. And my heart started, I felt like it was going to pound out my chest. And then I was brought back really quick. And the room got hot and flames came up. And the TV, I heard people screaming on it. I started calling out for God. And this is where, like I say, the deception comes in big time. Because this black silhouette entity appeared in front of me. And then I had this feeling of some kind of peace. And then it all went away. And it was like I was sober. It was like I never ingested anything. It all went away after that. And I realized this went on for what felt like about 3 hours of torment and torture. And I realized I was still watching this video of the Freemasonic artwork, and it was 30 seconds and the video passed.
Yeah.
And I started wigging out. And then I fully believed in this moment, since I had that feeling of peace, that I saw God.
Yeah.
I thought God came and saved me. Some foreshadowing, it was not God. I realized it was a Lucifer, it was a demon, an angel of light that was deceptive. However, whatever people's opinions are or classifications on that, that's what it was. It was not of God. And then my paranoia, the chaos in my life, the mania, even though I had that little bit of peace, shortly after, it just kept going up, even at a tenfold level at this point. And I thought God was telling me to do all these different things. You know, God's directing me to this. I got a direct connection with God. I can't be deceived. I got the Holy Spirit. That's what I fully believed with all my soul. I end up getting pushed to the point where I go to make my first testimony video. Because at this point, I believe I'm getting followed. I'm going to be killed for the stuff I'm talking about. This was a feeling that really ramped up after that experience with the psychedelic. And I'm still going to the Orthodox parish at this point, but not as much now. I kind of backed off a little bit,
Gotcha.
leaning more on my own understanding. I decided that I was going to make a video before I get killed, explaining everything in my life and my story. Then I also found some images online of different things that I came up with some wild theories too, and I thought I was exposing something. I thought I was exposing Antichrist. I believed it was my calling to do this. Like, God has me on a mission, the whole nine.
Yeah.
And I made these videos and put it all over my social media, every social media I had, because I just had enough. And I realized, looking back now, the only Antichrist I really exposed at that moment was the one inside myself. Due to my cadence and how I was talking in these videos, full-blown psychosis, full-blown delusions. Like, people have different opinions on, like, what to do in that case when it comes to church or hospital, mental hospital. But something needed to intervene. You know, that's how far gone I was. And then at this point, my dad, I had conversations with him, and I would try to tell him about different things from my childhood that I went through. And And one of the days, like, he just told me to suck it up and get over it. So that made me put a big space in between me and my dad, and I never
Yeah.
went back to his house. And every type of religious conversation I tried to have with him, like, he would try to treat me like I was a crazy person.
Hmm.
Yeah, some of that was true, but, you know. So I was going to the beach that weekend. So I make all these videos. I post them online. I'm like, all right, someone's gonna come kill me after, whatever. I'm gonna go to the beach. Someone's gonna kill me, they ain't kill me on the beach. That
Hmm.
was really what my mind believed at that moment. I was done. And I posted on my Facebook after I did all this, and I said, don't worry about me, guys, because I'm finally free.
Hmm.
Whatever happens, like, this weight isn't on me anymore.
Hmm.
And I was like, just don't let the hard work I've done to this point go to waste. And then I went to the beach. I sat on the beach all day waiting for someone to come kill me.
Hmm.
Obviously, nobody came.
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody came.
Right.
At that point, I believed I was being gang stalked. I was a targeted individual.
Hmm.
I went down that rabbit hole. I fell down that rabbit hole big time. Because that's usually, like, that's the big deception to that. Is like, yeah, and yes, I do believe there's people who are actually going through that type of thing. But I do fear that a lot of people are just being pushed to think that as well. Because that problem takes care of itself.
Yeah.
So I believed I was being targeted, I was being gang stalked, the whole nine. So I'm on the beach, and I'm just sitting on the beach, and then it gets dark. And this homeless guy, I didn't know he was homeless at the time, but you see homeless guys were walking by from metal detector. And I had a watch on my wrist. And I said, hey, you find anything nice? And they were like, no, no. And I was like, well, if you come talk to me, I'll give you my watch. It's a really nice watch. I said, I just want to tell you my story and try to bring you to Christ. And I told them my story, and they talked to me. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, if someone's going to come kill me, I want to take everything I have and help these two people. Otherwise, it's going to go to waste. So I brought them to the pizza place. I bought them food. We drove around in my car. They ended up being drug addicts, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, and I talked to one of them about that and how just try to stray away from that, get away from that, that whole nine. They were taking me all over the place. I thought I was being followed. There was one thing that happened that did really verify that I was being followed to me at that time. And it's still possible that this might have been the case, but I understand that it just as well could have been a delusion. So it was about 6 o'clock the next morning. I didn't get any sleep that night. And I was still driving around with these two guys in my car. And we ended up pulling up to a gas station. And if people are familiar with tourist beach locations, it's dead in the morning. There's not a soul in sight. I had this white rental truck follow me for like a good 15 minutes. And I ended up pulling into this gas station. They kind of like just, because I was being vigilant and paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
And the truck pulled up behind me with its lights on. And my buddy went in the gas station real quick, came back out and the homeless guy, he's my buddy at the time. And he went in, I think he bought some Red Bulls or something. And he came back out. And then the guy behind me in the rental truck just pulled off. So that confirmed to me, could it have been a just 1 in a million coincidence? That is possible. But I still kind of question that one isolated thing to this day. But, whatever.
Hmm.
A little bit later on that day, as it got more into the day, the homeless guy, I ended up getting a hotel room for that night. And I told him, I said, man, you come stay at the hotel room with me. You can stay there tonight and, be on your way. I went to the Dollar General. I bought him new socks, toilet paper, toothbrush, toothpaste, mouthwash, anything I could get for them.
Yeah.
The other guy left at this point and went back to whatever he was doing. So it was just one of them with me at this point. We make it to the hotel room. He says, I'm going to go check on my friend. I'll be back. He actually comes back. He tells me this thing about, he says that I need to go to my dad's house so I could go. I have to help him go look at a vehicle to buy. That's what he said. So I went and dropped him off at his dad's house. And he had some of my things with him that I was trying to help him out with. I even gave him my phone, one of my phones I had. I gave him some other things. But he ended up taking some things from me too, which I didn't realize in that moment. But I did give him some stuff. So it wasn't, he didn't steal everything from me, but he stole a couple of things from me. He tells me to go to a Food Line parking lot and wait, and he'll meet me there. And I never questioned it. I just believed it. No discernment, no, just whatever. I went and parked, and I talked to a couple people, and then I slowly started to realize he's not coming back. I'm being played. So I'm spiraling big time at this point. I go back to the hotel room I was staying at. I called 911, told him I was deaf. I was like, and he got my devices. I'm worried about this happening, but I was manic. The officer comes up, and I was so on edge and nervous to the point. The officer just looked through the window of the hotel room, and I jumped and grabbed my chest. That's how terrified I was. I opened the door, and I just start just dumping everything on that officer. And he's looking at me puzzled because obviously it sounds psychotic and crazy. And then I realized how deep the enemy can work to deceive us. The officer asked me the guy's name. I said it's Jon Snow because that's what the guy told me. I never watched Game of Thrones a day in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a character in Game of Thrones.
Right.
So imagine how the officer looked when I told him I was robbed and because I was helping out Jon Snow. So the officer obviously didn't believe me, and he just left. And I was like, but the officer questioning me, basically it threw me in an even deeper spiral, how he didn't really care or whatever, and left. And I was like, all right, it's over. I'm killing myself. I'm over it. It's done. I don't want part of any of this. I'm going to take my own life. I get in my car, and I had a pretty nice car. And I decided I was going to get on the highway. I was going to speed to the highest speed I could and crash my car. I get in my car, get on the highway, and this is coming out the beach, main strip. And I start speeding up, and I get into the left lane and really start pushing it so I can get to the speed that I think is going to successfully handle the situation. And for every reason, there was a car in the left lane, but it was going slow. Right after I decided to do that. And the car on the back windshield, I will never forget this. It said suicide is not an option. And under it said John 10:10. That verse talks about how a thief comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That's when I realized I finally experienced God. That's when I realized this is who God is. So I went back to the hotel room and I went to sleep. I woke up the next day and I drove straight to the parish that I was attending. And I talked to the father there and confessed to him about all that.
Yeah.
And I could, looking back now, I could tell he knew that I was going through delusions or some type of demonic oppression. He could tell. So he treated me with such grace and care and kindness. And, his name is Father Timothy. And he's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
And all he did was try to just get my mind off of it. This is one of the first times that I really felt like someone genuinely cared about me without any benefit from it.
Yeah.
He lets me spend the night at the parish. And it was It was the most peaceful night's rest I've ever got in my life.
Hmm.
But I will say it wasn't a light switch flipped and I was fixed and hit. It was not. But that was when I started having to rein back a little bit and start really using my discernment. But I was still manic and psycho at the time, to be fair. So then I'm staying in my car. I'm living out my car because I'm not going back to my dad's. I don't got nowhere to stay. I done left my apartment. I don't have nowhere to go. Have all my stuff in my car. So I go to my hometown, or one of my hometowns. I have a couple of hometowns where I spent a lot of time at as a child, moved around a lot. Um, and then I'm staying out in my car, and I'm spending time at the library and just reading books, trying to spread the word. No, I'm sorry. Right after I went to the beach, or right before I went to the beach, I I went to the Waffle House in that same area before I left to the beach, and I met these Russian kids who were a part of a Baptist church somewhere. It was somewhere in Virginia because I'm in North Carolina. I met them at the Waffle House. And I was telling them my story. And they're like, "Whoa!" And they told me like, if you want to come check out our church sometime, like hit me up. They gave me their stuff. And as I was leaving, and that person could attest to this day, I left that parking lot, and someone tried to run me off the road
Hmm.
as I was leaving. Is that connected to this in any way? I don't know. Just an interesting thing that happened. So after I came back and went to the parish and confessed to Father Timothy, I hit them up. I was like, I'm gonna go check out Virginia. Maybe I'll just stop by their church and see what's up, you know. And I went, Virginia. It was beautiful. I saw a bunch of cool stuff. Saw some Amish people for the first time. That was interesting. Went and checked out their church. Decent, decent service, decent people. Good time, you know. Then I left, and then I went back to the hometown where I was hanging out at the library. And one of those days, I pulled up to Starbucks because I had to charge my stuff and everything. I go into the Starbucks, and I come back out of Starbucks, and my car's gone. It got repoed because I wasn't making the payments on it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I came out, and I lost everything. All my belongings in the car, and all I had was my book bag. And I was going to, I walked over to the Ollie's. I was going to buy things so I could go out in the woods or something, and I'd be all right. I was like, it's my only option. I happened to be blessed with a very, very great person who hit me up in that moment and offered to come get me. And she came straight and got me, and she gave me a place to stay.
Hmm.
And I'll always respect her for that because she put up with a lot of mess from me. You know, coming down from this whatever I was going through, put up with a lot and treated me with so much grace. So I went to her house. She helped me out big time. I started, doing a little more learning about God, this, that, and the third. And I had a friend who's Pentecostal. So I didn't have no way to make it to church at that time. I didn't have a car. So it was just a situation came up where I had a Pentecostal friend because I was still technically like inquirer of the Orthodox Church at this time, I would say. So my Pentecostal friend hits me up. He's like, "You want to get baptized?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Well, come with me this weekend. We'll go. We'll go to the mountains and we'll do it. You know, I got some friends we'll be staying with. We're all Christians,
Hmm.
and it'll be a good thing."
Yeah.
And this is where like I'll start talking about some of the deception that may be going on in certain areas and things. But they were all really awesome people who I felt like had a genuine love for Christ, especially him, my friend. So it was good for me in that moment. But there was a couple people in that group because they were more on the charismatic side. There was a couple people in that group, and I'm not demonizing nobody. I just think maybe some people want to be a little deceived in some areas. It's possible. Just like I've been deceived in many areas. It seemed like to me, with some of the people I was talking to, telling my story, their responses to me were validating my delusions.
Hmm.
Because, in a lot of the Pentecostal circles, it's a lot based on your own personal interpretation of the Bible. They were speaking tongues, trying to do deliverances on me,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And I allowed them to do it because I was like, I just want some help or healing.
Sure.
But one thing that kind of struck me off guard with it was when they tried to do a deliverance on me, I wasn't doing the things that they expected to happen that they typically see in their church. I coughed a little bit because I feel like they
Mm-hmm.
were kind of like pushing me to they're like, it's okay if you throw up, and they'd tap me. So like it made me gag because I was thinking about it and it was in my mind, but never anything more than that. But
Mm.
they were like, it was like each time they kept like tapping me harder, like trying to incite a reaction out of me or like
Yeah.
try to get me to do something like to show some outward expression, like just really weird and looking back kind of deceptive to me. But maybe that's how they were taught. But I don't think God is not the author of confusion. So, but I got baptized the next day, and the baptism was great. I felt like a new person coming out of that water. I did feel peace. It was in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So as long I heard that, and I was okay with that, with my understanding of Christianity. As long as I got baptized by that, at the very least, like I was just hoping for the best, doing the best I could. And it was a great moment. It was awesome. It was in a river. It was cold.
Hmm.
If whatever was in me didn't leave from the deliverance, which I don't think it did, it came out of me because how cold that water was.
Hmm.
I'll tell you that much. But anyway, so that went good. But one thing that was kind of weird after that was after I came out of the water and went back on the shore, one of the members came up to me and asked me if I wanted to start learning how to speak in tongues. And I
Yeah.
knew at that point, that's not something you learn.
Hmm.
I was like, nah, I'm okay with that. I'm just kind of taking it as it comes. And I was doing my best to be respectful about it.
Yeah.
So that was one of the kind of the weird things about it. But the people I was talking to the night before that was trying to do a deliverance on me, they were telling me that I was a prophet. I should do prophetic artwork, this, that, and the third. And man, that's why I wanted to bring that part up because imagine how many other people are going through what I went through and they're put in these certain circles. It's more dangerous than the event they were going through to have that mindset.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a prophet, you know? I was under delusion.
Hmm.
I was following, well, looking back now, if you ask me, I was following Lucifer. I didn't even realize it. I thought I was following God, but I wasn't.
Yeah.
So I hope that people watching this will use their discernment. I think we're reaching some very dangerous times in the world where a lot of people are lacking discernment,
Hmm.
and I see a lot online of personal interpretations, people glorifying miracles, seeking out miracles and supernatural experiences. And I'm here to say that all that's demonic.
Hmm.
We don't seek out miracles. We know God makes miracles, but we don't seek out these supernatural mystical experiences because that's what the demons want us to do.
Hmm.
So I'm going to read 2 Corinthians 11:13 through 15. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it's no surprise if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness, the end will correspond to their deeds. We have many verses talking about the deception in Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and the false Christ and false miracles and false wonders that are going to happen. And I have to tell people that the moment you think you can't be deceived, you're already there. Especially when it comes to any type of supernatural experience you're experiencing. All that stuff's demonic, because it happens, and maybe not all the time. Maybe, God does have ways he works in that is miracles. But if that's what we use solely to prove our understanding of Christ, I plead with my whole heart that you do some deeper diving into this,
Hmm.
and maybe consider not going by our personal interpretations. Because imagine if imagine someone else who maybe didn't have the strength, or maybe didn't have like this thing or that thing, and maybe their delusions get pushed up, and then they do something bad to themselves because of it.
Yeah.
And it's like we live in a world that has a Christian body where everybody wants to call themselves a Christian all in the same body, to find Christ 100 different ways. Half of them are chasing miracles. Half of them are doing this. Half of them are doing that. So that was when I understood, like, my personal interpretation has done nothing but deceive me.
Yeah.
I understand I cannot just read the Bible and come to a conclusion that it has any type of, I would say, a long lasting benefit for me anyway, because I look how deceived I was. And I
Yeah.
swore up and down I had the Holy Spirit. I swore up and down this. Like God was talking to me. Nobody could tell me otherwise.
Hmm.
So if we just use these supernatural experiences, personal feelings, and this, that, and the third, like, the Holy Spirit isn't just a feeling in your chest. I hate to say it, but people blaspheme the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
So that's where I would turn to say that. So after I came back from the baptism, I was like, all right, I need to go to church. I need to get back to church. I had a little bit of money to use Uber to go to church. I was like, I need to get back to church. The next Sunday coming up, I wake up early, look up the closest churches near me. The closest church to me was Orthodox Church, bringing me right back to where I fully believe now, where I should have always been.
Yeah.
And then I buckled down and started seriously focusing on my catechism at that church and submitting to something else other than myself for understanding. And I would say maybe it's a mixture of the baptism and that's when I can say I finally found some healing. I finally started being reined back to reality and an understanding.
Yeah.
And it all came from having spiritual fathers around me with really amazing discernment. I would recommend people look up Sephiroth Rose. He's about to be canonized as a saint, Saint Sephiroth of Plotina, if I'm not mistaken. Well, he wrote a ton of books about this situation.
Hmm.
He wrote books about afterlife experiences and how even if we may have an afterlife experience where we believe it's Christ, it still possibly could be deception. I would just as a idea to ponder upon. I think every Christian should ask themselves, how would you respond to someone who died, had an afterlife experience, and came back and became Buddhist or became any other religion than Christianity? Like, how would you respond to that if you rely solely on those experiences and your understanding of those experiences?
Hmm.
But in the Orthodox Church, I have found people and writings that give a solid foundation to help discern these things. And that's the healing I found in the Orthodox Church. So slowly, it started being reined back. But it got to a point where the female I was staying with was like, all right, it's time to leave. And that's the best thing she could have ever done for me because it forced me to call my father. I called his wife, my stepmom at the time, basically to talk to them and try to apologize. After I went to the church, after I tried to make the attempt on my life, I was leaving the church, and then I had this idea that, and this was before, like I said, I went, got baptized, came back and fully submitted. So this was still surrounding delusions. I I was leaving the church. I went to a lot of places checking out stuff. let's just say, and leaving signs for people and and trying to tick people off. But I was still like delusion. I was pushing. I was trying to do outward things for vengeance and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. So I was just being a little butthead going around all the place, terrorizing stuff. Well, I had good intentions, but we have to understand that Christianity is so much more than your intentions.
Hmm.
You can't use a Ouija board with good intentions.
Right.
So that's something people should discern about. Anyway, I had this idea that the FBI was looking for me. It just popped in my head. So I hit up my dad and I said, "You're selling me out to the FBI." But I got a response that blew my mind. I got a response saying, "Yeah, they came to the house. What is going on?
Hmm.
This, that, and the third. They're looking for you. But you're calling out all these high level people and they say you're suicidal."
Hmm.
And then and then he started blaspheming my faith, my own father. And then I was honest with him about how I realized the drug situation surrounding that, it hasn't changed. And then I was told that I'm a liar. My mom's putting stuff in my head, even though I haven't talked to my mom because I have a restraining order. All these things, and I was told, "You need to get over yourself, bro," by my father, my
Hmm.
dad, my biological dad. So that really like rubbed me the wrong way. Obviously, I was like, man, like I discerned that, and I told him what he could tell the FBI for me, and it wasn't anything nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if he told him that, but whatever. But anyway, we'll fast forward back when I finally was getting some proper discernment, proper guidance spiritually, and I called them, my dad, stepmom, and I called to apologize because I believe that I was lying about things a little bit because I understand I was going through delusions, but a big portion of that as well is I was like, if them thinking that is the case, then I'll just put that behind me so I can rekindle with them, and hopefully they'll forgive me. That's why I contacted them.
Yeah.
And at this point, I was kind of in between that girl's house and my father's. I was staying with a buddy in between, and I was going to church with him. He was bringing me to the Orthodox parish because he was a member, or he is a member. But I was like, I do need to. I need some type of help in my life. So, like, I'm like, if I can make it with my father and rekindle with him because he claimed, he has some health conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I need to like just put that behind me. It's okay if he thinks I was lying, like just whatever. And I basically, like, I was called a liar, that whole nine. So I end up apologizing, and I talked to him, and he seems genuine to me, and we really talk, and he seems to respect my faith a little bit more with that conversation.
Yeah.
So he comes and gets me. We go back to his house, and the first thing that he did when we got to the house was show me his bank accounts again.
Hmm.
I go up to my bedroom that they already cleaned out. They already had my bedroom completely cleared out. I go in there, I start bawling, worried I made the wrong decision, this, that, and the third, and I contact my friend asking him for some help on what to do, and he told me, and he said, "You're there for a reason." I said, "Okay, I understand that." I went back around Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
That December, my biological father passed away in the room beside me. It was from drug use, from my understanding, from what I saw.
Hmm.
And I helped do CPR on him.
Hmm.
And I remember when the ambulance guy or one of the paramedics or whatever. Um, when I was saying my last goodbyes to my my dead father laying in the floor, his old gray, the paramedic guy told me he found a boatload of drugs and nobody seems to be surprised. So he'll just leave it at that. As I was telling my father the last goodbyes. When I called him, when I was trying to apologize to him and try to, get back in on cahoots with him and try to honor him, he gave me this rundown on how he wasn't on drugs and this, that, and the third, and I believed him. But then that happened and it showed me what really happened.
Yeah.
It was to the point where after the police left with him, like, I went up to his room. I believe I was grabbing something or I was doing something for his wife, because she was obviously going through it. She was all the pieces. She was the one who went into his room and found him because he would stay in his room all day and lock the door.
Hmm.
He would come out of his room in the afternoon after she'd go in there and check in on him. That's how I knew it was okay. I could go hang out with him or see what he's doing. Other than that, I just stayed in my bedroom that I had there. I wasn't getting a lot of good sleep anyway, so I was sleeping in pretty late. I found more fentanyl in the room. It was enough fentanyl to take out a neighborhood. I'm assuming based on the whole lot of what the police found and what I found. And I just got rid of it. I wrapped it up in a glove, tied it up, got rid of it the best way I could.
Yeah.
I didn't want nobody to mess with it, touch it, or get in contact with them. And then shortly after, like I had to leave that house, and ever since then, I've taken the time. He passed away in December, and ever since then, I've done nothing but study the Word. I've been working on trying to get another vehicle so I can get back to church as soon as possible. Um, I've just been really buckling down and taking the time to read the Word and submit to the Orthodox understanding
Yeah.
the best way I can in my current situation. And that led me to a lot more healing and peace and understanding. And I am where I am today speaking with you.
God is always present, and sometimes we try to run away, drive away, put things on our shoulder, try to execute things that we think need to be done, try to behave in ways that we think are right in the moment, but we don't have that same eternal perspective that God does. And I think that that's really the challenge for us is we have eternity, but we don't see eternity like God does. We don't see the things the way that He does, and I think that that's really the difficulty is we see what's happening in the moment, and it's easy for us to want to respond to what's happening in the moment. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your testimony. I mean, what would you say to somebody if they are in your situation, coming off of drugs, coming off of, paranoia, manic episodes, things like that? They all of a sudden they step inside a church. How would you want the church to respond? I mean, I think you've touched on this already with some of your experiences, but
Yeah.
how would you like the church to respond?
So I will say that the way that I was responded to in the church was amazing. That's how I would just that's what I would recommend. I
Yeah.
guess the main thing I would recommend is, if someone finds themselves in that situation, because ultimately it's hard being manic and going through a psychosis. Like, most of the time you can't tell those people anything.
Yeah.
But if you're coming down from that, if you're coming out of that and you're hating on yourself and you're looking down on yourself, I promise it gets better.
Hmm.
Because I was so embarrassed of all this up until recently. I was embarrassed And since that guy stole my phone, all my psychic ranting and everything was still posted online that whole time.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
after I did some serious repenting and contemplating, I was, yeah, and I couldn't do it up until that point, which is very interesting. But I was finally able to get access to those things and take the things down. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
And I was so worried about what people would think about me. That was my own concern. And that was narcissistic in itself, egotistical, because it doesn't matter what people think about us. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter how crazy our testimony may sound.
Mm-hmm.
And on my new social media, I share like a very short version of my testimony. And I tell people that don't water down what's going on in your life to make other people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Don't water it down. I gained my life in Christ, but as far as the material world, I lost everything I owned,
Hmm.
everything I built for myself, everything. And I thought it was over. But this, my whole life has been the best thing that has happened to me. Like I understand now, especially with the guidance of the Orthodox Church and my amazing friends and the family I do have around and my amazing siblings, I don't have to be scared anymore. I understand that what I went through was training for the boldness that we have to walk in these situations. And talking about, the reason and the meaning of your channel name, it's like it did nothing but prepare me for it. If a day come for martyrdom, then so be it.
Hmm.
Nothing's shaking me of that. Off
Yeah.
with my head, you know? Let it glorify our Father in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had mentioned that you have social media that you've been sharing some of your testimony on. If anybody has any questions for you, wants to reach out to you, talk to you about anything, where can they find you online?
Okay, so they can find me on Facebook at Jackson Herritt, last name Herritt.
Mm-hmm.
They can find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is JMTats, JMTATS, and the other one's JMTats, but instead of the A, it is a V. So JMTVTS. My YouTube is also JMTVTS. My TikTok is JMTVTS. I figured we may need a name change soon to kind of consolidate and make things a little more simpler, but that's where people can find me right now.
Yeah.
If you look at my socials, you'll see you'll see my tattoo profile, and you'll even see the year gap in posting. And I deleted some things from my past, especially some really blasphemous tattoos and stuff like that I did. But there's 2 pictures that have a year gap in between them on my Instagram. And if you go below that, you can see how my life was and what it entailed before. And now you'll start to get to see what's entailing after.
Yeah.
But one thing that interests me now is people will see me post things about some of the wild things that people walk by every day that have significant spiritual meanings and just things that people don't question or think about. I like checking out these things and I'll record and post them and make content. I want to pursue the absolute truth in Christ. And I want to help other people experience that in the best way I possibly can in my current situation. And honestly, the biggest piece of advice I can recommend myself is if you feel like your Christianity's feeling a little too shallow, consider coming and checking out the Orthodox Church with an unbroken history all the way to the apostles and solid foundational biblical teachings. A lot of these arguments that we will go on and debate over and over and over have been debated for thousands of years. Nothing new under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
It's something to consider checking out. I want to make a point that we have Mormons, Protestants, Orthodox, Catholics. I'll just kind of group them. They all claim to follow Jesus Christ, all claim to have the Holy Spirit. They all have different theological beliefs, and it is virtually impossible for all those things to be true. So I'm just promote discernment and do your research and consider coming to check out the Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
I believe people can find the same amount of healing and turnaround that I have. It's been the best thing to happen to me.
Jackson, again, I do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for being on Martyria.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, Matthew.